Hello, Creep Cult. Welcome to your Patreon bonus episode. We are getting started with the Porcelain Peak ABCs of horror and sci-fi, and we're getting things kicked off with Attack of the Killer Tomato.
Oh my gosh! I hope you guys aren't related to, or not related. I hope you guys aren't allergic to plants that are in the nightshade family, because that's what tomatoes are.
Oh yeah, is it a berry? Right?
It's a
berry.
It's a berry, yeah. And I only know that that's a thing because my boss is allergic to like tomatoes, eggplants, like anything that's in the nightshade family.
That's kind of dope though, because I'm like, I'm allergic to peanuts. Like, yeah, you little bitch. But
I'm allergic to deadly nightshade.
Its variants.
I have a stupid food fact that I found out today. Do you know what paprika is? What it's made out of?
Isn't it like bell peppers?
It's dried ground bell pepper. Yeah. I did not know this.
I was going to make the guess that it was some sort of like crushed up bug, but I think that's a lot of like paints. Like I know a lot of the paints that we use in candy. Huh? What?
Well, like no, like what you're saying, like the shellac or whatever on candy, yeah, it's like beetle shell.
Well, and there's also bugs in ketchup. Like there's some percentage of ketchup that has bugs in it. I remember it was a big deal when I was in like middle school or something. Everybody was like, "Oh my god, there's bugs in our ketchup!" And it's like, dude, you seen Attack of the Killer Tomatoes? There's a lot worse things that could be going on with tomatoes.
Yeah, no,
you could have Hitler jokes in your ketchup.
We eat a lot of weird shit that we don't realize. Like vanilla is like beaver anal glands, castoreum or whatever, like comes from beaver's ass, I think.
No wonder vanilla is my favorite flavor of ice cream.
Or it might be raspberry, yeah. But like, there's weird shit like that where it's like, if it says certain things on the label, that's probably some weird animal or bugs.
My bugs.
Magoo.
Yeah, pretty much.
So
anyway,
to do a little bit of catch-up.
Directed by John DeBello, written by him, Costa Dillon, who's also in the movie, and Stephen Peace. So if you don't know, this is a 78 parody movie.
Parody's nuts got him.
Hey! That actually worked this time, though.
Yes.
Because, you don't always hit.
A couple little tomatoes.
Yeah. Anyway, this is about tomatoes that become sentient and start attacking people. And surprisingly, not a lot of tomatoes in this movie.
Yet, you hear more from the tomatoes than you see them.
Yeah, man, it's all about the stuff that's implied. That's the truly horrifying stuff. It's really the sound design that gets down to your bones.
Yeah, so it's very loose. Tomatoes start attacking people. They grow to varying degrees. We don't super know why. And there is a small branch of the military that is trying to investigate it while also...
in a small room.
Yeah, while also simultaneously trying to do PR to make tomatoes cool. And it's just, there's an hour and a half of ridiculous.
There's a few original musical numbers.
Which were fucking hilarious.
Was Rob Dyrdek on that episode of Ridiculousness? That hour and a half long Ridiculousness?
Yeah. You don't want to miss out on it.
Yo, man, where'd all these tomatoes come from? Ridiculousness. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen that show. But
DC.
In case you guys missed the last episode and have no fucking clue what we're doing for these bonuses now, we are doing the Porcelain Peak ABCs of Death, I guess is what we're calling it.
Horror and sci-fi.
The ABCs of horror and sci-fi. We really got to workshop that. We got to come up with something that is at least at James Wanuary level of wordplay. But anyway, last week we spun the wheel of 3 A choices.
We can just call it Abka.
We could call it Alpha Death.
Alpha Death?
Instead of Alphabet.
Oh, okay. But where's the sci-fi come in?
I don't know. I don't care. People die in sci-fi movies.
Okay, fair enough.
So,
allegedly.
What I can happily say is that I wasn't angry that your pick ended up winning after watching it. I just took a little nap in the middle because this movie definitely takes a pretty much one joke and stretches it for, how long is this movie? 80 minutes, 90 minutes?
Yeah, just about 87. So, but it was made for $100,000, which at the time is kind of a lot, I would say.
And then it quintupled its budget.
Yep.
Yeah, and features a real plane or helicopter crash that
Yeah.
just happened on the day of shooting, and they incorporated it into the script. And luckily, it didn't kill anybody. Looking at you, John Landis.
Look at you, John Landis.
Yeah, John Landis.
I don't
But
wanna
thank you
look
for
at
paying for our Patreon if you're watching this, John. But yeah, so there's the first like 10-15 minutes of this movie, I was rolling.
Yeah,
I was
so caught off guard.
I was like, how the hell have I never seen this before? This is fucking hilarious. And I was about ready to put it up in like, Airplane or like the Naked Gun level of like, I was like Leslie Nielsen definitely should be in this movie.
It's almost like a scary movie type for like the Japanese like kaiju movies.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah, like you said, the first 20 minutes and even watching it, I was like, oh, I understand why this is a cult classic. This is fucking fantastic.
And why it has like 5 sequels or some shit.
Yeah,
and a comic book series.
And a cartoon from when we were kids. I think that I remember that more than I remember this, because I don't know why I would know this movie. Because I've watching it, I was like, I've never seen any of this.
Well, in watching it, I was like, why did my grandma talk about this all? Like I mentioned last week, I was like, my grandma used to talk about this movie all the time when I was a kid, and I have no idea. Probably just because it was her example of like movies with the most ridiculous premise.
Yeah. And, like you said, it's great and it's super funny. And then after that initial like 20 minutes tops, it is a very loose plot with random things trying to bridge us just to the next bit. And the bits don't always work. So sometimes it's like, well, that wasn't really worth my time.
It's also rough because, as you alluded to earlier, this movie pretty much does its best to hit all the bases in terms of being racist, homophobic, sexist, like every style of bad taste joke you can make. This movie makes.
There are some definite F-bombs. I caught at least one.
Yeah, not the fuck kind.
Yeah,
I did think I did crack up a little bit when the guy just randomly is just like, tomatoes are tomatoes are F's. And then the guy has to correct him. I was like, well, I don't like the use of the word. That's a pretty funny, just like out of nowhere thing for that guy to say. But yeah, I mean, it's just rough watching a movie where it's like, okay, one, I can let slide. Couple, I can let slide because of the time period. But then you can tell that, it's kind of what these worst scary movies end up being, which is just like really, really bad taste, raunchy, like fucked up, like I was going to say Jesselnick level jokes, but he's like actually good at what he does. But just stuff that seems like, I don't know, at the time I don't know if it was considered offensive or if people were just like
Probably the latter with this.
Yeah.
I don't think people were as like aware of how fucked up they were being at the time.
Yeah.
But I thought the opening talking about the birds and how nobody believed that the birds would, like, trying to compare this movie to Alfred Hitchcock, like,
almost
right off the bat.
Who's laughing now?
Yeah. So I thought that was hilarious. It kind of reminded me of something like Birdemic, because the Birdemic movies like are constantly reminding you that the director is a huge Hitchcock fan and that The Birds is like what he's been trying to do for 3 terrible movies now with the Birdemic franchise. But so that opening was great, and then I loved the opening song and the credits, how they had like random ads popping up,
Dude,
like ads taking up space, and like call in to place your ad here, like in the credits. And then they do that later in the movie where they have just like the scroll of like whatever store at the bottom, it's just like, come down here for sweet deals on furniture or whatever it was.
Tables $5.
The tiny room bit was fucking hilarious.
It's like
the first time
peak,
it happened.
Yes.
The very first time, peak level comedy. Just like how everyone's trying to fucking squeeze into this tiny little
and then having to
room,
like climb over the table, like
that was too good. And then they're like, we got one more coming, and I was like, where? Where are you gonna put this person?
And I liked the soldier who just like throughout the entire fucking movie is just dragging his parachute around behind him, like with everything that he's doing,
Which again,
and just randomly pulling out his sword and trying to stab people.
It's funny like the first time or two, and then I was like, okay, we get it, man. Like, yeah, that's your whole bit, and you're just a joke character. Like, you're not even really a character.
Yeah, and that's where it loses its steam, is when it runs out of the like 5 really good jokes that it has, and then it's like, cool, now let's recycle those for the next hour.
Oh, dude, that like Android bit was pretty fucking funny. It was like, it only has one working leg.
Yeah.
That had me rolling.
But
so there's a review here that I just saw pulled up that I thought kind of sums up this movie pretty well. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes may be one of history's most misunderstood films. It's often been celebrated as a prime example of so bad it's funny cinema, when in fact it's an attempt at intentional comedy that is at best a scattershot success.
Yeah, and I do think that's perfect, because if you go into this, like, I went into this with the mentality of like, okay, this is a parody film. This is, parody
that's got him.
of like you said, Japanese monster movies and B movies in general and stuff. So I was ready to be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna like get on this movie's level. And I did, and then when I realized that it wasn't that funny after a certain point, I was like, oh, okay, well, if you're going for comedy, you lost it after the first, like I said, 20 minutes or whatever. Yeah. If it had been a so bad it's good, then potentially like the accidental poor quality of the tomatoes and all that stuff could have carried the movie further if they were trying to be serious and we were laughing at the movie. But they want us to be laughing with it, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of out of this after a little bit. Like I said, I ended up like in the middle falling asleep and having to go back and be like, am I really rewinding a half hour of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes so I don't miss an important part of the plot?
Well, and I feel like it's supposed to be a horror comedy, and I don't think that it achieves any part of the horror aspect, really. Like,
I think all it's really attempting is to capitalize on horror tropes, like the monster concept. I don't think it's really trying to be scary in any way. I think that's where you bridge from comedy to a parody. I think that it's a different distinction. I think specifically with that subgenre, it's less about like being accurate and still having scares, and more about just being crazy.
Yeah,
I think that it does that, but I think that it just, your mileage will vary with the comedy, just because there are certain things that land really well, especially if you are a fan of, like Mel Brooks and some of the, things of Leslie Nielsen's career. You will enjoy some of these like really slapstick jokes. And then there's other stuff that just kind of falls flat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole time I was like, this feels like an Airplane, or, basically what you guys were saying, like a Leslie Nielsen movie.
Yeah, I put in my notes here, to me, it had a very Airplane meets Ed Wood sort of vibe, and I think the Ed Wood thing came partially from the characters, but also just...
The movie Ed Wood or the director Ed Wood?
The director Ed Wood, like Plan 9 from Outer Space, where you can tell that a lot of the reason the movie is the way it is a budget thing. Like, obviously the budget gets in the way of this being more effective on the horror front, because they have a few like foam big tomatoes that they have, but they really don't have anything in terms of turning this into what I think they might have also been kind of trying to go for, which is like a Little Shop of Horrors type thing, where like I could, because of the poster for this, I could imagine if they had like a really good makeup effects or like special effects person doing like moving puppeted faces on the tomatoes with like crazy teeth and stuff, but instead you just have little tomatoes being rolled from off camera
or played in reverse.
Yeah. I did like the bit how I noticed that like when the tomato goes up the stairs, I was like, oh, they just chucked that down the stairs and then reversed the footage, and like that's clever. And then, but yeah, I mean, really, they lucked out with having a really impressive helicopter crash that was totally accidental, because it makes the movie right off the bat feel like, I was like, oh shit, is this a lot more expensive than I thought it was? And then I immediately looked it up and went, oh no, that was an accident. That they were just like, cool, yeah, that's money on the screen, baby. I also put in my notes that this movie stars David Miller and George Wilson. Put those together, you get George Miller. Which is a little hint at what we're talking about in the main episode. And then also the song Puberty Love, which I was like, Puberty. What the fuck is this?
But I think that it's really funny that that Puberty Love is basically the savior of the people in this film, and it stops whatever's going on with these tomatoes. But then there's the tomato with the earmuffs, and then they just show it the sheet music. It's pretty inspired choice.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely really clever bits that I'm going to remember for a long time after this. Like the tiny room thing, I'm just going to remember forever probably. I was just like, oh, that was a really funny bit in some movie, because I won't remember the rest of it. But that song was performed by Matt Cameron when he was small, and he would later go on to be the drummer for Soundgarden and Pearl Jam.
Oh shit.
Wow.
That's fucking tight, dude.
Yeah, so big things have small beginnings.
Yeah, so speaking of, just a little bit more about this movie's, I guess, legacy. There are a few sequels. There's Return of the Killer Tomatoes from 1988, Killer Tomatoes Strike Back from 1990, and Killer Tomatoes Eat France from 1991. And there was a cartoon from when we were kids that was just Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. There was a canceled remake, apparently, and a reboot was announced in 2018 at Comic-Con. And I guess filming began in July 2019, but I don't know if anything ever came of that. It seems like it would come out by now.
Yeah, I don't really know what somebody's new exciting vision for a remake of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes would be, but it could be exactly what I was just talking about. Like maybe they have a slightly higher budget to do like actual effects on the tomatoes, or they'll just use, crappy plug-in effects CG to give them little like talking faces.
I'm just picturing VeggieTales at this point.
Dude, VeggieTales, spiritual successor to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I'm sure that's how they'd like people to talk about that. Well, yeah, that's about all I've got to say about Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you like horror comedies or that parody style, then this might be a movie for you, at least part of it. Like we've talked about, it does drag in a lot of areas, but I think for the most part, I'm glad that we watched it, and especially it being like a cult classic, I feel like it made sense for us to check it out, and I'm not mad about it, but I think it could have been better. I'm curious what the sequels are like.
I was just about to say that I have no desire after this to go check out any of the sequels, but I have heard.
I think George Clooney's in one of them.
Yeah, his debut is in one of these movies. I think maybe the sequel to this, but I've heard that this is the worst of the series.
Oh,
really? That they actually get better after this, and maybe that's because they lean more into the successful bits that worked in this from the comedy, but. Who knows? Maybe I'll check out just the second one, just for Clooney if he's in that one, and then stop there.
Catch a vibe.
Yeah.
But, I'm just in the mood to smash some tomatoes.
Would you watch other ones?
I mean, I wouldn't be mad about it. Like I said, I wasn't mad about this one. It did get a little boring, a little dicey there in the middle piece, but I thought there was funny stuff sprinkled throughout, and, if they came up with better bits and more varied bits in future sequels, I would be down for that.
Different varieties of tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes. Other tomatoes.
Heirloom tomatoes.
What he was like, we came up with an abbreviation. It's like STP.
Yeah, I was like, isn't that an actual thing?
Yeah. So so some stuff in there scattered. Anyway, cool. So next week we are doing B movies and potentially B movies, but not to be confused with the B movie. And John's gonna pull up the wheel
of endless possibilities.
I selected Battlefield Earth for next week. John?
I selected Battle Royale.
Ooh. And Anthony's got...
Battle Tomahawk. Bone Tomahawk.
Bone Earth.
Wow. All right. Go ahead and spin that wheel. Come on, Battlefield Earth. Ruin my night.
Fucking kidding me?
Oh man. And
baby.
Hey, I said last week, I was like, you came up with the idea and you've gotten it twice in a row.
I have no control.
I'm starting to think that you've been greasing some palms. John, you had your palms greased recently by this guy?
No.
Likely story. But hey, I've never seen Battlefield Earth. I've just seen 10 million videos on YouTube about how terrible it is. Yeah. So I'm down. I'm prepped.
What?
It's okay.
No, say it. You gotta say it.
I don't want to watch I don't want to watch the L. Ron Hubbard movie.
Well, you're going to.
Apparently.
Dude, you got through Arachnophobia. You can get through Battlefield Earth.
I don't think I can.
Yeah, so tune in next week while we discuss Battlefield Earth and also the entire history and inner workings of the Church of Scientology.
Sheesh! Or instead, check out our regular episode and hear us talk about the Mad Max franchise. Thank you so much for tuning into this one, and we will see you next week.
Keep it creepy.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.